Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we're going to be talking a little bit more about Tesla's Q1 delivery and production report yesterday. We'll take a look at how other automakers are coming in, comparisons with BYD, etc. We also have news on Giga Berlin, Giga Texas, a couple of things on Cybertruck, and more. So we've now got our answer on how Tesla stock is going to react to the delivery report. Tesla down 6.1% today, closing at $194.77, while the Nasdaq was down 0.3% on the day. The Dow up 1%, S&P up 0.4%. Oftentimes that reflects a more difficult market for growth type stocks, and the Nasdaq was down more significantly earlier in the day, so not an easy way to start the day for Tesla, but nevertheless, a negative reaction, at least initially, to the delivery and production report, but kind of just pushing the stock back to where it was on Friday. From what I have read so far, analyst reactions seem to be relatively neutral. We're not going to go through all of those, but pretty neutral, which shouldn't be too surprising given the numbers coming in pretty close to analyst expectations. If there is a little bit more of a negative reaction, ironically, I think that's probably due to Tesla's production number and the degree of difference between the two. We talked about inventory. It's increased from 13 days up to about 16 days now following Q1. But even with all of the headwinds that are a part of the first quarter, I think it would have gone a long way to inspire confidence in continued demand growth if inventory had declined this quarter following price cuts. Now we've got relatively short backlogs, we've got inventory growth, which are not necessarily bad or unhealthy things, and in fact could be a very healthy thing for the business in general. We've talked about unwinding the wave, but it does leave those demand questions lingering, and I think that is the biggest question for Tesla right now, in combination with Tesla's gross margin, which of course we still have to wait a couple of weeks to learn more about. So those are just my thoughts on how the report is being perceived right now, with a day to think about it. The reality and the importance or unimportance of certain factors, that's going to be different from perception. But the latter is always going to be what's driving the stock over short periods of time. To better understand the reality, we'll look forward to that information again from the earnings report. By the way, I did update my Tesla financial model with the information that we got yesterday. That is up on ShareLoft. All right, let's take a quick look at the week ahead before we get into the news. It should be a relatively quieter week this week for macroeconomic reports, but remember, on Friday the Nasdaq is closed. For Tesla specifically, overnight tonight we should get the final week of insured vehicle numbers for Tesla in China. Obviously, we have the global numbers already, but that'll give us some insight on how the quarter came in, obviously in China specifically, and how big of a record it will end up being for Tesla this quarter. Because this is the last week of the quarter, I would expect this to decline significantly week over week, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. All right, getting into the news, we'll talk a little bit more about Q1 industry performance later on, but I want to start off with an update on Giga Texas. Tesla on Twitter sharing that Giga Texas has now achieved a 4,000 vehicle production week. Obviously, last week we heard for the first time Giga Berlin had achieved a 5,000 vehicle week. They hit 4,000 back on February 26th. So Giga Texas 35 days or 5 weeks behind that pace for Berlin. Hopefully that means that later this month or early in May we see Tesla hitting that 5,000 vehicle week milestone for Giga Texas as well. As we know though, the ramps can be a little bit bumpy. Remember from December we heard from Tesla that Giga Texas had hit 3,000 per week 3 days before Giga Berlin had. Then a really great ramp for Berlin throughout the quarter and a little bit slower progress for Texas. But hopefully they've gotten through some of those things that were impeding that ramp. And hopefully this means good progress on dry battery electrodes on 4680s. But of course Tesla could just be increasing 2170 vehicle production at Giga Texas as well. If Tesla can even maintain a 4,000 vehicle weekly production rate at Giga Texas throughout Q2, that would be ahead of my current production expectations. And as you may have seen on Twitter, the numbers that we got yesterday implied that Tesla produced about 170,000 vehicles in March. That annualizes already to 2 million vehicles per year. That's before this type of a run rate at Giga Texas. So if this happens, if Shanghai continues, which is really the big question mark, but if that can continue to hit the peak monthly production rates that we know it can hit, then that would pace Tesla pretty easily for their first 500,000 vehicle production quarter in the second quarter. Now it's a long quarter, a lot can happen, there could be downtime, there could be updates with Hardware 4, Project Highland, we don't know, but those are the sort of rates Tesla is achieving. On a similar note, we've got an update on Giga Berlin. This is from RBB24. First, they have confirmed with a managing director for an employment agency that Tesla does indeed have its third shift in place at Giga Berlin. No surprise on that given the production rate progress that we have seen. But interestingly, they also report that, quote, however, it is assumed that there will soon be a fourth shift for which workers are being sought again, end quote. With translation, I'm not really sure if that means that workers are already being sought or they would anticipate to be sought again soon. I think it's more of the latter, sought again soon. And it's not exactly clear to me who this is being assumed by. I don't know if that's coming from the employment agency. But if this does happen relatively soon, I think that would give us continued confidence in how Giga Berlin ramps up throughout the rest of the year. We talked a little bit about, okay, is this a step change going from 3,000 to 5,000 because of this additional shift? with that allowing the ramp to progress a little bit more quickly than the prior milestones maybe would have implied. If so, it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect that progress to level off a little bit, but if there are these plans for a fourth shift, that might just keep on rolling. So we'll be on the lookout for any more updates on that. And then just a quick thing on Giga Berlin. There was a sort of Giga Berlin cinematic tour published by a YouTuber in Germany. Nothing really new out of that, but it does give some nice context for what is happening there at the factory, so I will put that link down in the description. Next up, we've got a handful of cyber updates. First, with the Cybervault. We talked about this on Friday. Tesla had put out that teaser image. We've now got the full details. This is available in Tesla's shop in China. Maybe not quite what we would have expected it or hoped it to be based on the teaser, but this is a charging product for $800, and it's basically a housing unit for a wall connector or mobile connector that can keep that connector secure. It does have lock functionality on it. So if you're in a shared garage, you can lock that up. You don't have to worry about someone taking your connector or taking your power. Definitely a nice option for some people to have. I don't know if a product like this warranted a tease ahead of announcement, but obviously we as a Tesla community can get a little bit overhyped sometimes. Partially on us, but Tesla's also got to kind of expect that to be the case with something like this. Anyway, elsewhere in the cyber world, we've got a couple of Cybertruck updates. Elon over the weekend tweeting that he did walk the entire Cybertruck production line at Giga Texas for several hours earlier that day, saying it's going to be awesome and feels like the future. So it's good, I guess, that it's taking several hours to walk the production line. It means there's something there to walk. Things continue to feel like they are finally pretty much on track this time around. Also, over the weekend, Tesla tweeted out sort of an April Fool's teaser video of the Cybertruck doing its crash test, but not actually showing the crash. Instead, just a painfully infinite loop of the anticipation of that moment, very reminiscent of the unsatisfying meme of a truck about to crash into a pillar that just never happens. So hopefully at some point Tesla will show us that footage, but as far as an April Fool's thing goes, I think this was really well executed. This has 70 million views on Twitter. At least the tweet itself does, 13 million views for the video. But the 70 million for the tweet, that is at least the most views on any tweet from Tesla this year. I don't know if it's the most all time. I'm not going to look back through all their tweets historically, but clearly Tesla did a nice job with this tweet, and I think it also highlights the immense amount of interest in the Cybertruck in general. And then one final thing on Cybertruck, Caliber 197 on YouTube has posted a drone flyover video of the Fremont test track with the Cybertruck out testing. So we've seen this before, but in this case, I think probably the most interesting thing is that there are a couple of places in the video where you can recognize that the rear wheel steering is engaged on this vehicle. It's a little bit subtle, but you can definitely see different angles on the rear wheels, both when turning left and turning right. All right, moving on, we've got a couple of lawsuit updates today for Tesla. First, on a labor relations lawsuit. This isn't new. We've seen articles on this dating back to 2021, maybe even before that, but this is an appeal regarding a complaint from the UAW for, among other things, a tweet from Elon Musk back in 2018 that they claim is a violation of labor laws. In that tweet, Elon said there was nothing stopping the Tesla team from unionizing if they wanted to, could do so tomorrow, but why pay union dues and give up stock options for nothing? So in 2021, it was ruled that Elon would have to delete this tweet as it could be perceived as threatening. Tesla argued against this because, as Elon had also tweeted at the time, the UAW does not have any individual stock ownership as a part of their compensation at any other company, so that would seem to be a pretty reasonable assumption for that type of an outcome. Nevertheless, the appeal was denied, so no change in the ruling. Elon will still have to delete this tweet, which, as far as I can tell, seems to be the only thing that needs to be done. There were no changes in any of the other parts of this case either, but maybe this type of a ruling would have repercussions for other things down the road. This is probably the final ruling on this one. This is the Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Next would be the Supreme Court, so Tesla could appeal, but it would be unlikely, I think, that the Supreme Court would take this case. So probably the end of this one. And then we also have an update on the racial discrimination lawsuit that we've talked about on a number of different occasions. This was once a $137 million award given to the plaintiff. We've spent plenty of time on this, so I'm not going to go through all the details again, but that previously had been reduced to a $15 million award, and now a federal jury has reduced that to a $3.2 million award. I'm not sure on the exact status of this, if there will be another go-around or if this will wrap this one up as well. All right, let's move on to some first quarter numbers from other automakers. These reports are still coming in, so we'll continue to keep an eye on these, but we'll start off with BYD. We've been following this through the China insured vehicle numbers throughout the quarter pretty closely, but from CNEV Post, we now have full quarter data to compare with Tesla. So the first one here, this is total BYD, including plug-in hybrids, including EVs, BYD in green, Tesla in red. You can see a pretty big drop quarter over quarter for BYD, while Tesla, obviously a small gain quarter over quarter. That total number for BYD was about 550,000, so that was up 93% year over year, but down 19% quarter over quarter. For just fully electric vehicles, the numbers are similar, but of course that takes a lot of the volume away from BYD. That puts their number down to 265,000 for Q1. The year over year increase there was lower than their total, up 85% year over year and down 20% quarter over quarter. Now, obviously, just like with Tesla, there are headwinds for BYD in Q1 with EV incentives, with Chinese New Year. Since BYD is predominantly in China, that's obviously especially important for them, but also highlights the strength of Tesla's number under those conditions. So since we've been talking about this, hopefully this number isn't too surprising, but I think it's very interesting to now see this from a full quarter perspective, and we'll continue to watch this very closely as Q2 unfolds. As for the US specifically, we're starting to get some reports from automakers. We can see a recap here from Automotive News on the year-over-year comparisons. I think the sequential is a little bit more interesting. Unfortunately, those numbers aren't in this table, but we'll take a quick look at a couple of them. So GM, they reported 603,000 vehicle sales in the first quarter. That was down 3% quarter over quarter. And again, that's US only, but helps to provide some context for where Tesla is at. And as far as EVs go, this was actually a record for GM, but just over 20,000 sold. They say they expect 50,000 for the first half of the year and then doubling that in the second half. So we'll see, but expecting pretty big growth this year. If we look at the model breakdown, it's mostly Bolt and Bolt EUV. That was about 19,700. There were 968 Lyriq sold and just 2 Hummer pickups sold this quarter. Quick look at Toyota. They sold about 470,000 vehicles in North America. That was down 8.8% year over year, down 13% quarter over quarter. We've also heard from Rivian. They announced production in the first quarter of about 9,400 vehicles, deliveries just below 8,000. That was actually down sequentially for both metrics, about 700 fewer vehicles produced than Q4 and 100 fewer vehicles delivered. So some pretty interesting numbers. We'll probably come back to this as Ford is expected to report tomorrow. I'd also be curious about Lucid. Not sure when we'll get their numbers. All right, last item for today, just a quick note that there is a new video with JB Straubel, of course, former CTO and co-founder of Tesla, and now the founder of Redwood Materials, just talking about some of the history of Tesla, what got it to where it is today, and JB's decision to leave that to start Redwood, and some of what they are working on. So I thought it was pretty interesting. I'll put a link for that down in the description if you want to watch that. It's only about 45 minutes with the intros, which actually were pretty interesting as well. So that link will be there if you want to check that out. All right, that'll wrap it up for today then. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday, April 4th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.